All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Natural Awakening podcast with me, your host, Wisdom. Today's guest is Tasshin. Is that how you pronounce?
That
Tasshin?
is how I
Tasshin?
pronounce my name. It would be Tasshin in Japanese, but I'm an American, so I mispronounce
Tasshin.
my own name.
Tasshin, welcome to the podcast. I wanted to have you on because we've been mutuals on Twitter for a while. I think you, as we were talking about before, I think you're a cool person doing cool things in the world, and I wanted an excuse to get to know you a little better and also share with whoever tunes into this a little bit about what you are up to. I imagine most folks who listen to this will be familiar, at least in part, with who you are and what you're up to. But for those who don't know, in as much or as little detail as you would like to get into, who are you?
Great. Let's see. Yeah, I really appreciate this question because I think I like to think about people's lives as similar to a story. And if I think of my own life so far, it's like, oh, I've finished the first act of my story, and now we're in the second act. We're like in the early stages of the second act. Hopefully, there's a full three acts and live a long life that is of great benefit. But I think the first act, and especially the climax of the first act, was sort of about this question, like, who am I? What am I here to do? And now the second act is about doing it. And so I really appreciate the chance to answer this question because I have an answer now. Which actually, I think people might know things about me. I'm certainly pretty prolific online, but like they may not know this answer. And so it's valuable to share.
Great.
Yeah, so I'll start in media res and say how I think about who I am now, and then say a little bit about my background. I just changed my moniker on Twitter to Fun Pilgrim. It was Love Pilgrim before, and I am creating the Service Guild with a bunch of my friends that I collaborate with, and that's actually how I'm describing my vow right now, is to demonstrate the intimacy of fun and service. So I don't really love either of those words because for me, there's like one coin that has those two things as each side, fun and service. And for me, my own internal phenomenological experience of fun is the compass that points me towards benefit and service. And that's what the Service Guild is about. And yeah, how I got there, I don't know. I grew up in Massachusetts, suburban middle class family, and then loved to read, had a hard time making friends, and then went to St. John's College where I read a bunch of books. That's a great books curriculum, and kind of encountered mysticism there, as well as Shinzen Young. I started getting really into Shinzen stuff, which I know you love his stuff too. And I decided to start meditating and meditated every day when I was in college, and basically realized I needed help with that. Like I wanted to do it by myself and figure it all out, and it was like that's
a tall order.
Tall order.
It's tough.
Yeah, no. I came in with many virtues to this life, and independently knowing how to meditate is definitely not one of them.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither.
Yeah. So then I got help. I went to what's now called Maple, the monastic academy. I trained there for about 5 years in 2 stints. I did 2 sort of tours of duty there. And I like grew up there. I like became a man there. And, I was 22 when I started and 29 or so when I left because there was a break in the middle. And it's impossible to summarize how deeply and widely I grew during that time. I wish sometimes there were sort of like before and after pictures, because when I was 22, sure. I was like, I just graduated college and was sort of this awkward, heady dude, very anxious and, sweet, but yeah, blossomed through the training. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And then I started my pilgrimage. I've been doing that for 3 years. So that's sort of how I've discovered. I'd say I discovered spirituality as a teenager through books, and then it really took till my late 20s to really find my own footing in the path in my own way. Yeah.
Kind of living into what you had read before.
That's right.
Yeah. Wonderful. So tell me more about pilgrimage. What does that word mean to you, and what is it that you're doing? Before it was love, now it's fun. But pilgrim, you're a pilgrim of fun now. Love
Yes.
before, presumably still love now, but
Yes.
love in fun.
Definitely. Um, well, Peace Pilgrim, of course, has been a huge inspiration for this. And if people haven't heard of her or haven't dived into her teachings, I can't recommend her highly enough. At this point, she's probably the biggest influence on me spiritually, which is really saying something. That means more than the Buddha and more than my primary teacher, Soryu. Like, Peace Pilgrim has just been such a huge influence on my life. And um, I think her teachings are such a medicine. And importantly, she was in the last century, so unlike the Buddha, she's contemporary and speaks a much more contemporary language that I think is very helpful. Um, for as incredible as the Buddhist teachings were, that cultural gap can be difficult to bridge sometimes.
Huge.
And
It's
huge.
pretty huge.
It's like several cultural gaps, actually, I think. So,
And then filtered through several different cultures, sometimes on its way to us as moderns in the West. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, but she says that a pilgrim is a wanderer with a purpose. And I love that definition because I think there is a purpose to my pilgrimage, and I'm still learning what that is and how to articulate it. But, um, sometimes people will say, oh, you're a digital nomad. And internally, I bristle a little bit about that because while it's true that I go from place to place and I am very online and I do projects online, uh, to me, nomad actually kind of implies like purposelessness or just like a happenstance attitude to life. And that may or may not be true to people's descriptions of their own experience of being a digital nomad, but for me it really is a purposeful thing to be a pilgrim. And um, I try to live in a purposeful way. And so um, I did 2 walking pilgrimages in the style of Peace Pilgrim earlier in my life, and I found those to be that even more than meditation retreats was such a powerful practice for me. I really accessed what I call trust, or what Michael Singer talks about as surrender in his book, The Surrender Experiment. Um, I could really get a felt experience of that through the practice of pilgrimage in a way that I couldn't through a meditation retreat, just personally. And then I could bring that back into my meditation practice, but I found it through pilgrimage. And this current pilgrimage that I'm on is definitely not a walking pilgrimage. I fly, I use cars and buses and all of that, but it does feel like a pilgrimage. And I travel from place to place and stay with friends who put me up on their couches and in their guest rooms. And yeah, it makes my way of life possible practically because I'm not paying rent. Although, I spend probably as much on travel as I would on rent, honestly. But yeah, it really, I've come to value how it connects me to so many people in so many places. And then I can kind of see patterns that other people might not notice, or connect dots that people might not otherwise connect, and build these really strong relationships over time that uh, benefit from having that deep in-person connection for a few weeks or months or something like that.
All with no fixed address. How do you manage that? Do you have a mailing address somewhere? Sorry, my mind immediately jumps to like how do you manage
Yes.
this?
I'm going to go off on a tangent, which is that I don't like that the
Tangents
government. I don't like that the governments think of like basically a property of a person as having a fixed address or place, and
Yeah.
that's necessary for bureaucracy, but is so not true to my experience. And um, anyway, I've used my father's legal address as my legal address, and I actually just moved to a different place, which I have been to before, but did not move when my father moved. So, but I moved to this new location and changed all my addresses. So that's how I do that, and he's been very gracious in that way. And logistically, that makes my pilgrimage possible to like still pay taxes and interface with the U.S. government in that way.
Government name, government address, but a pilgrim for fun.
Yes.
I'm curious if you could say a little bit more about Peace Pilgrim. I haven't actually dove into her writings. So what? I mean, it's kind of in the name, but what is her teaching?
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, historically, she was the first woman to walk the whole of the Appalachian Trail in a season. She did a lot of walking early in her life, and of course, her pilgrimage had a tremendous amount of walking. And she was really concerned about peace, and initially about world peace and the prevalence of war and the threat of nuclear weapons, and did a lot of activism about that earlier in her life. And then she had what you might describe as spiritual awakenings, and she had something like as I understand it, such as my understanding is, something like an initial awakening, and then I think that's when she started her pilgrimage, and then about 15 years later, she had something like a total awakening, or I might be getting the timeline about when her pilgrimage happened mixed up. But in any case, her path unfolded about 15 years duration, and she shifted to sort of talking about how peace had to start from within, and you had to find inner peace in order to have that world peace. And she still really cared about world peace and the threat of nuclear weapons, but she became clear that it starts from within and you have to have inner peace. And so she was trying to spread a message of inner peace for the sake of world peace on her pilgrimage. And she, something like the last 30 years of her life, she crossed the North American continent probably 7 or 8 times during that time.
All walking.
And while walking.
Yeah. Wow.
And then one last thing I'll say about her is she said that her personal prayer was to make her an instrument through which only truth could speak. And I've been so struck by that because, one, I've been practicing telling the truth in my own life, but also I think that just rings so true in her teachings and her words, that she says things that are just piercingly true, and even people who might not otherwise be disposed to what she has to share, like, wow, that's real. And every word is like that. And so I've been really struck by various teachings that she's had and revisit her writings often because they've been so influential to me.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. If I wanted to read a book, if someone wanted to read a book, I will after this. Which one would you pick up from her, or did she write, or were her stories collected, or how did that happen?
She wrote extensively while she was alive, and then her writings were collected posthumously by others, but they did a very good job. There's 2 main things. She has a booklet that's quite short called Steps Towards Inner Peace, and then there's a book that's sort of this blue book that you can order both of them for free from the Friends of Peace Pilgrim, and they'll mail them to you for free. And there's also PDFs of them. And so you basically don't have an excuse not to read them. And then they're so good. As with any book, just reading the first few pages can give you a sense of whether it really feels resonant or not. And I think most people who are listening to this will find it resonant. But yeah, that's...
Imagine so.
Yeah, just looking up Peace Pilgrim, and you can order her books for free or download them. So,
thank you. Well, I'll have to take a look. And I think it's wonderful that, I think everyone, all of us who tries to live in a kind of conscious, intentional way, casts about for role models for those who have gone before, kind of a path, a mold to, if not, make a carbon copy. You can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think of myself as like her awkward little brother or something like that, even though we're not a familial relation. I feel a kinship to her. And I also imagine that if I were to meet her, she would give me a big hug and then like playfully, seriously slap me around a little bit and be like, "You are so backwards in these respects," and give me a firm talking to. And I'm wary about who I receive such talkings to because I'm stubborn, very stubborn. But I would take what she had to share.
So I think this connects to, I asked what you'd like to talk about before we started. And I think this connects this idea of pilgrimage and this idea of service, fun and service, what you're doing with the Service Guild and this idea of karma yoga, which is something from yogic traditions. Maybe you could say a little bit more about that.
Yes. Did you ever play any like role-playing games?
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I didn't play nearly as much as I would have liked, but I think they're a really good metaphor for spiritual practice, and just my own experience of it. And that I think in my late teens and 20s, I was sort of training in one class or one role, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be a monk, and I'm supposed to be a monk, and I'm supposed to meditate a lot and do formal practice in stillness, and that's the path. Like, that is the path, didn't you know? And it was a very like head first idea of the path that I'd received from reading a lot of books, and um, and eventually that just broke, and I had to find my own way into the path. And I don't do that much formal meditation practice in stillness these days. I have a rule, which is if I don't want to meditate, I don't have to. But if I want to meditate, I do. Um, so I do meditate, but only when I want to. and um, and I do a lot of informal practice in life, like a lot. Like that's the main focus for me is informal practice in life. But formal seated practice, and because of my pilgrimage, I have no routines or habits. Like I have to remember to floss and eat 3 meals a day. So like having a daily sitting routine where you go in the same room at the same time every day on your cushion is just not an affordance that's available to me. So, but that's okay because I have independently found my way into what might be referred to as karma yoga, or doing acts of goodness in the world. And from a Buddhist perspective, I think of this as I'm focusing on sila, or virtue. I'm sort of setting concentration and insight aside for the time being and really focusing on developing virtue and character, and specifically through doing good deeds and service projects, what I like to call fun service projects. And just not even focusing on my vices or trying to diminish my vices or work with my weaknesses, but just really play to my strengths and do good things and do as many good things as I possibly can. And that comes from having discovered how joyful and fun that is. As I said earlier, I don't love the word service because that for me has a connotation of self-sacrifice or burden or torture. Yeah. And it's like, oh, that's not what I'm talking about. If that's what you're hearing in your mind when I say service or karma yoga, like that ain't it.
I can see in the way that you're talking about it, there's a springiness, a joyfulness there that I think, is the authentic spirit of service.
Yes.
In terms of, I think, spiritually, something that's actually spiritually impactful, not just head down, nose to the grindstone.
Yeah, and also for others instead of for self. It's really symbiotic between my own joy and what benefits others, and that's a sustainable feedback loop in a way that sacrificing yourself for others' benefit is not. But yeah, once I found that in myself, how much I enjoy doing things and projects and collaborating with people and just making things that I think will help the world, it was like, a lot of people have the problem of like, how do I motivate myself to do my work or to find the energy to do it? And it's like, you'd have to stop me from doing this stuff. You'd have to force me not to. Like, this is all I want to do. So how joyful that is. And I just want to do as much of that as I can with my life.
I think that's really lovely that you're able to do that and that you are doing that. So thank you for doing that in the world. I think that I would like to see more of that.
Well, and that's where the guild comes in that it's a group of people that I collaborate with on specific service projects. And we all kind of have this orientation of, hey, we're volunteering to do this because this is fun for us and we want to make sure it's fun for us, and we're friends, and this is the kind of shit we like to do as friends together. And coming from that perspective of our own joy being the fuel rather than some external concept of what we're supposed to do to help others. And that actually, I think, is of more benefit to the world. And because we're a collective, a group, because we're coordinating our efforts, we can have a bigger impact than any one of us could have alone.
I took a look at the Service Guild website, and I saw the RPG influences, which I appreciate. At one point in my life, I was running one game and playing in two others of table, D&D, other systems as well. That was while I was living on a commune. There were things I liked and didn't like, but one of them was that it was easy to get people together for games. Good time. So I appreciate
need that
the RPG
in my life.
Influences.
I should do that sometime. When I was a kid, I was so into them, but I didn't really have any friends that wanted to play with me. So I gotta remedy that for my inner child.
Well, I mean, if you want to play D&D sometime, I haven't played in a while. It'd be fun.
Noted. All right. Great.
So what are some examples of the projects that you and your folks, your guild mates have been up to? I'm imagining things like sparking joy. Well, I don't know. You tell me. I would just be imagining things.
Yeah. Well, a really big important part of the Service Guild has been organizing it into what we currently call departments. You could call them teams as well, but I have a reason to like the word department. But in any case, there's 3 departments right now: the Love Department, the Curiosity Department, and the Empowerment Department. And those are groups of people who are organized around the same service theme that we enjoy doing projects related to that, and kind of have a similar vision for what that could be. So, I imagine that part of why I am connected to you and on this podcast is because of the love work, especially with loving kindness meditation and the Brahma Viharas. And for us, we have this view of love as like a general approach to practice, a very heart-based approach to practice that's influenced by the Brahma Viharas, but not limited to it. And really bringing that into the culture through things like one of the projects we do, for example, is run these metta dance parties where
I've seen the ads for that.
Yes. That's how I like to practice it. And so we share that with people, and it's a joyful way to practice. And so that's the love
Tell me
department.
about the practice of metta in dance, because that sounds amazing, but how do you go about facilitating that, introducing that to people? Like I can imagine doing metta in movement and in dance with music, but how would you describe that to someone maybe who isn't familiar with that sort of practice, or bringing that into movement?
Yeah. Well, the way the event goes down is once everybody's gathered, I give a talk about loving kindness and the path of love, and then I give a guided meditation about half an hour. And so we do the practice together. And then the instruction is, hey, just keep going when the music turns on, and everyone else is going to do it as well. And so maybe you're thinking loving thoughts or visualizing things, or ideally feeling the love in your heart, and everyone else is too. And then all the music that I've sort of curated, which I DJ for people, is a sort of thematically, musically connected to love. And then I put samples on top, like from Dharma talks and movies and stuff like that, that's sort of connected to love and the heart. And so the whole environment, the music, the other people, the intention of the event is there to remind you, hey, keep doing the love thing, and everyone's doing it, and you can start to feel it. For me, I can really feel, oh, wow, that person is bringing a lot of love into the room. Like, keep going. So it's really starts to be, I don't know, sometimes I think of the heart practices as sort of self-inducing MDMA. I'm very fond of MDMA as a substance, and it's been very important for me. And I think the heart practice, like loving kindness meditation, kind of induces a lot of those qualities. And so these metta dance parties, it's like it's explicitly
not
a sober
too
event
from MDMA rave,
but exactly, the vibes are very similar, even though it's a sober event. So, yeah,
that is lovely to hear, because I do, I have partaken in a in an MDMA rave, but I gotta say I'm not too much of a fan of the come down.
Totally. Yes, it's quite intense. It's quite intense.
So, metta rave. Love to see it. What are some other? So that was the love department. What about the other facets?
Yeah. So the curiosity department is about following your curiosity and trusting the questions that are in your heart. And so I've had a learning practice for a long time and have sort of evolved that over the years. And then other people in the curiosity department also have their own learning practice and how they're going about learning and growing in the world. And then the question for that department is how we start to support other people in their own learning practices. And we've been doing some experiments with that and are trying some new stuff. But in general, zooming out quite a bit, the shared intention is, hey, really trust what you're interested in learning about and follow the questions that are in your heart. And then as you learn about the things that you're interested in, share what you learn. I like to say, like, leave the breadcrumbs you wish you'd found. So my blog and my podcast are kind of, or my Twitter, are ways that I'm sharing what I've learned along the way so that it might benefit other people. And that's the way in which it's a service project.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I mean, I I've been kind of periodically active on Teapot and in kind of the internet Dharma scene, moving between periods of residential training and then out and going back and forth with more or less engagement. And I think I I could have been helped a bunch earlier on if I had caught some of those breadcrumbs a little earlier and had seen caught some of those trails earlier. And it makes me glad to see that you and other folks are, leaving those for other people who are just taking this up or coming in or looking for new directions. So
Me too. I wish, yeah, but here we are. So
here we are.
We can help the people who are to come. Yeah. And then empowerment is about this idea of a vow. And that's a teaching that came to me from Soryu, but of course, other people and other traditions have talked about something like this. Peace Pilgrim actually calls it, everyone has a part to play in the life pattern. That's how she talks about it. And in any case, it's the idea of something like a life purpose. There's a specific, you could say, like philosophical frame about what it is ontologically, is what I would say. But in any case, we believe in something like a life purpose or a vow. And the empowerment department is about assuming that everyone has this vow and then seeing what we can do to help people in living their vow. And often what that looks like practically is helping them to do a fun service project of their own and supporting them in that process.
It's like a vow incubator.
That's right. That's
a life
right.
purpose incubator. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing what hatches, carrying the metaphor forward.
Yeah. There's a really beautiful community of people that we have, and ideally also, so far we've mostly focused on individuals with the empowerment department, but it's sort of hoping to create the conditions whereby there can be really juicy collaborations between people and people supporting each other in doing service projects. And that's definitely happened to some extent, but there's just always more that's available. And that's one of the things that excites me most with that work.
Yeah, one of the things that I notice in your online presence over the years is you seem to be a great networker and an uplifter of your colleagues, your friends, your peers, and, a kind of social glue. And, so thanks for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a joy to do that and to connect people and support them. And I think it's definitely a strength of mine and something I've cultivated, but I think it's something that we all benefit from when we help each other out. And, certainly you're doing this as well through your podcast and other work. And I think the kind of aim that I'm going towards, and I really think most, if not all of us are going towards, even if people have different metaphors or language for it, is one that comes about through collective intentionality and supporting each other and being of benefit to each other. It's not something that one person alone can bring about.
No. I mean, having tried to go it alone in various ways at various points in my life and take a kind of, influenced by fiction and RPGs and other things, it takes like a heroic lone stand. No, it doesn't work.
Who amongst us has not tried and failed at that?
Is there anything in the topics that we've covered so far that you'd like to circle back to, or maybe nuance a little more, or a question in there that I didn't ask that you would like to respond to?
I mean, there's a billion things I could say, but I feel pretty complete about the different things I've said. Yeah.
Great. Well, I also feel pretty complete about what we've talked about so far. So I think I'm going to move on to some questions that came in from the audience. Some of them serious, some less so. What is the relationship between metta and equanimity? Is one question someone had for you.
That's a terrific question, and I do have thoughts about it, but it's one that I feel I have more to learn about, and I'm curious what other people think. And and just to zoom out a little bit, I do not feel in any respect that I am an expert at love or the path of the heart or the Brahma Viharas. I think I'm good at teaching that technique, especially to beginners, and like onboarding people to that technique and being like, here's how you could do it. But if anything, I've been so humbled by how much more love is always possible. There's always more love. That's really become a motto for me. And the more love I encounter in my own heart and in the world, the more I feel like there's just infinitely more love that's available. And so I will state what I have to say about this, but I just want to be like, I really, this is just a perspective. Of course, metta and equanimity are both two of the four Brahmaviharas. I think of metta as like the purest and simplest form of love that's just goodwill towards whoever it's intended towards, whether it's yourself or someone else. And equanimity, of course, Shinzen would talk about it as not pushing or pulling on experience, where you're not trying to make it different than it is. And I think that's so essential for truly practicing the path of the heart, in that it would be easy to get attached to or averse to something in the heart where something's extremely pleasant or extremely painful, and you grab onto it or avoid it. And so to be able to feel whatever is present in the heart, whether it's goodwill or even hate, I think really going on the path of the heart, you have to welcome and embrace everything, including hate. I've certainly had to look at hate in my own heart. But to have equanimity with that, and not with the example of hate, like not make hate bad or say this is shameful or add on another layer of trying to push it away. You just say, oh, there's hate here. And almost in the back of your head or the back of your heart, you might say that hate is not the answer, that it's not the solution to the problem, but it's there nonetheless. And you don't get there by pretending it's not there or wishing it weren't there. And so whatever's in the heart, pleasant or unpleasant, accepting it and allowing it and growing your capacity to feel it and experience it and even see its wisdom without trying to fixate on it. Yeah, those are mutually supportive for sure.
Thank you for that answer. I hope that speaks to what that person was hoping to hear. Related, how deep is your love? And I guess more broadly, how deep is love? You said there's always more.
The image of a spoon of water and the ocean is coming up. I have a very nice spoon with some very nice water in it, and there's a whole ocean. I'm a perfectly kind and loving person, and it's just there's some love in my heart, and that's good. And I'm going to keep the love in my heart and keep growing it, and I try to act on it. And then there's limits to it. There's only so much love and in my own heart and my own capacity to love at this time, and it's always growing. It really does feel like a muscle that's being strengthened, and from that perspective, Arnold Schwarzenegger is one of my heroes. I never would have expected that, because I like to joke. Yeah, exactly.
You've got to feel the pump with the metta.
That's right. And I'm like the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the heart. I'm like doing great over here. There's definitely, it's a big spoon, let me tell you, but it's still a spoon and there's still an ocean, So, yeah, I don't know, both big and small is the answer.
Okay, now the most important question. Are you bouncing on it?
This, of course, is a reference to me making an abundance of bouncing on it jokes in the draft several weeks ago. I'm gonna. You can. One of the things I've learned in Curiosity is you can just answer a question any way you want to. So I'm going to answer it in a totally indirect way, which is I love eroticism and sexuality, and acknowledging that in myself and making that okay and expressing that to the world has been such an important part of my path. And I think that a lot of my spiritual power comes from acknowledging the shape of person that I am and not making it bad, and really allowing it and playing the cards I'm dealt. And so I think for me, sexuality is just another form of play, and it's a really enjoyable form of play. And I think there's plenty of good reasons to have norms and conventions about when and where that's shown or how. And I try to do it in a very respectful way, but it's been important to be like, hey, I'm a sexual being, and we're actually animals. Humans tend to forget that we're animals.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. But yeah, we're animals, and it's important to remember that and not just totally make ourselves distinct from our friends that are animals on this planet. And yeah, that's just part of who we are, and acknowledging that's been important to me. So I've actually recently been publishing my erotica online, so people can find that on my website. And all of my novels have sex scenes in them, and I love that for me. And then I put on my Twitter bio, I don't know if people see it or not, but it has the like 18 sign. It's like, yeah, don't read this stuff if you're under 18. So hopefully people are warned off by that. But it's like, yeah, I'm okay with my sexuality, and if you're not, great. You don't have to follow me or encounter my stuff. That's fine.
It's
but
a free
I'm gonna
internet.
be me. Yeah, it's a free internet. So, and I'm an adult, and so if you want to be an adult with me, that's great. If you don't, no problem.
Okay, so I have come to the end of the questions that I had. We could close it off here, short and sweet, or if there's anything else you would like to bring up or chat about.
How does talking about all this make you feel? What's moving in you internally?
I mean, thinking about, because it's fresh, the erotic piece, it caused me to reflect on my own kind of tortured relationship to sexuality for a time, discerning to ordain into traditional Buddhist monasticism and being celibate for some time while I was still quite young. And had, just like a torrent of testosterone coursing through and picking up some of those traditional practices, a super practice, focusing on the disgusting aspects of the body. And I effectively became asexual for a while. I found, those traditional practices, they taken up intensively, they worked as advertised. And then when I decided for various reasons not to ordain, and then coming back into a lay life outside of monastic training, and then engaging with romance, with sex, with relationship, I did it badly, and then unskillfully, and then psychologically, and then also relationally in communication. Not any terrible transgression, just clumsily, and with a lot of tension within myself. And now, five more years later, having engaged more with the tantric side of traditional Buddhist practice, in which eroticism is used as a vehicle, I could have really used that. I could have come to that sooner and probably had less distortion and clamping, clenching. And the distortions of body, speech, and mind that come from suppressing, denying, shoving away, cutting off.
Do you think that the difficulty you had returning to sexuality and romance in a skillful way was causally related to doing those practices that were so effective?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I suppose they're not intended for you to return to the world necessarily.
No.
It's like...
No, if you spend a bunch of time regarding your own body as though already dead, and regarding others' bodies as though already dead, dissecting it part by part, focusing on the blood, the pus, the mucus, the imperfections of skin, that this really is just a bag of bones, flesh, blood, and feces and urine, etc. And then cultivating a kind of revulsion to corporeality, which I had already kind of going in, which is why I probably was attracted to that kind of monastic path of withdrawal and kind of renunciation. I was afraid of my own embodiment and of the strong feelings, right, that arise due to being an animal, as you were saying.
It's funny. I think I was, as I hear you talk about that, I feel like I was sort of blessed in that for two reasons. One is I was raised a Unitarian Universalist, and they had a sex ed program that I did at my church that, funnily enough, my dad was one of the teachers for. So my dad was my sex ed teacher, and which was less awkward than you'd think. Actually, it was fine, but it sounds funny. So but that was such a like sex positive frame, and I got that influence from a young age of like, yeah, we're just sexual beings, and here's what you need to know to be responsible with that. And that was such a good frame. That was certainly better than the sex ed I got in school, even though I think that was probably good by American schooling standards. But so that felt like a real blessing from a young age to just get the facts and in a sort of non-judgmental way. And then the other big one was, I think that was part of why I went to Maple, was that you were allowed to be in relationships and allowed to have sex with people. You just couldn't have sex with people at the monastery. And that felt feasible for me in a way that I I admired people who were celibate or took a path of complete renunciation, but I was like, that ain't me. So just again, like kind of that self knowledge of like, that's, um, you wouldn't ask a tree to run a marathon, it's like it's doing its tree thing. So um,
I
anyway,
also
those were
grew
blessings
up in
for
a
me.
sex positive environment. So it's kind of funny that it was a flight from emotion as much as embodiment and sexual expression for
Mm-hmm.
me, which is partly why I decided not to ordain. It wasn't my renunciation was, or my attempts at renunciation were driven by unwholesome roots of aversion, and by and large. And when I came to see that, I couldn't go through.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious. I said earlier that I was really focusing on the training of sila and ethics and virtue, and I'm wondering how you think about that training.
Yeah, work in progress. Having in my own life and practice, really put the emphasis on the samadhi and the panya, using the Pali words, and then because putting so much time, energy into those, then coming back into the sphere of right relationship, right speech, and finding a lot of unalignment, and that being quite painful. Seeing my own patterns of speech, of action that are, kind of viscerally unaligned,
Mm-hmm.
often enough because of my own conditioning with what I know to be true, what I know to be good, wholesome, and aligned with what's with what's awake, and to the living reality that's here. That has been, yeah, that's a lot, work in progress, and the work of a lifetime, right?
Yes.
To bring that into full accord.
How do you think about doing that work though? Admitting that it's a work in progress and takes a long time and the rest of one's life and so on.
Within myself, it's not so much. I don't think about it so much, but I can feel it. It's an embodied thing. So
Mm-hmm.
when something that I say, or when I take an action, a body that is out of alignment with what is true, with what's or when something unskillful comes out of my mouth, or when I do something with less than full attention, it's like there's some friction there that is, yeah, it can't be ignored.
Mm,
I mean, I can try to ignore it for a while, and then
sure.
it just kind of gets more and more,
Hmm.
and then yeah.
Hmm. What a beautiful way of framing it. I really appreciate that. Hmm.
And it's also, thinking about it more, trying to set up structures, habits, and behaviors that make that easy, basically.
Yes. Yep. Definitely.
Set up my environment and my relationships so that coming into that alignment is not uphill.
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah.
Part of that for me was just I did a lot of retreat in 2020, and I felt like I had such difficulty with it, and really realizing that as far as I could tell, the difficulties I was running into were causally connected to a lack of virtue and a lack of character, and how that was really a constraint or a bottleneck on my capacity to develop concentration and insight. And wisdom. And I was like, oh, all right, I need to focus on character. And it wasn't like, oh, I was an evil person, but I just saw how the limitations of my virtue were the things that were blocking me from developing further concentration and insight.
Yeah, yeah. For me, I the practicing now and then still learning kind of within a kind of dual Indo-Tibetan and Zen framework, the fruition of the path, sometimes how it's framed in Zen is a seamless unity of samadhi and prajna. And I notice it most in samadhi. If there isn't kind of a integrity of body, speech, and mind in the way that I conduct myself moment to moment, day to day, samadhi is just less accessible, less possible. And then wisdom doesn't function without that power of the samadhi, or it doesn't function cleanly or clearly. So there's a pretty direct feedback there.
I have a intention or promise to myself to ask all of the questions that I'm curious about. I have a very peculiar question coming up, which is, if you had a child, what story would you tell them that told them about what the path is without using any formal spiritual concepts?
Sure. A story. A little child, just like you, wanders in the dark into a hall of mirrors. And because it's dark and the child you've never been in this environment, you get lost in the reflections. And there are many passageways, doors, and compartments within this large house. And the mirrors are at odd, strange angles. And what appears, though it's only yourself that appears in this, because you're lost, tired, frightened, and confused, all of these appearances are quite frightening. And you run towards some, seeing an escape, and you hide in a corner, or you run around and around and around, only ever seeing reflections of yourself distorted in the dark. But as soon as you recognize, wait a second, these are all mirrors. That's just me. You can find your way out.
Well done. You rose to the challenge. Nice. I love it. I wish I'd heard that as a kid.
Alrighty. Anything further?
I don't think so. I so enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for having me on and for your questions and for everything you do.
Yeah, likewise, Tasshin. Great to get to know you a bit better. I hope folks have enjoyed this conversation. Where should I direct people to check more of you and your stuff out?
Yeah, my personal home on the website is Tasshin.com. That's Tasshin. And then we have an incredible domain for the Service Guild, which is serviceguild.fun. I was so pleased when I found out that was a top-level domain, .fun. So it's perfect for us. So that's where people can check out the Service Guild.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.